When have you ever feared for your life? Why? Serious. When I got caught in a riptide while stupidly swimming alone in the ocean. Same. I'm not a good swimmer and somebody had to save me. Thank you. David, wherever you are, I've never forgotten. He probably never forgot either. Woke up in the throes of a severe asthma attack. Clocked my pulse at 227. As I was digging for my inhaler, I kept thinking what a stupid way to die this would be. This happened to me last year. Terrifying. X was driving, and a moose walked out in front of the car. Moose are no joke. Every person I know who's been in an accident with a moose have their entire care totaled and the moose just walks away like nothing happened. Makes you wonder why we drive these flimsy cars instead of sturdy, reliable mooses. 7. To earthquake in Japan made the apartment I was in wobble like jello. Tried to stand up in my chair and walk away from the window. Ended up crawling away and having a small bookcase spill my books on me. Spent a few seconds leaning against the inside wall / sliding closet, looking at the ceiling and having a very vivid picture of being crushed to death by collapsing concrete and debris. Slept outside for 2 nights after evacuating. Apartment did not even have a crack in it. 10/10ths would recommend Japanese government housing. This happened to me last year in Taiwan. I was in the floor 33 of a building. Right after that, a tsunami warning was issued. I was terrified. Spent the next 2 days sleeping in the hotel lobby at the ground floor. 10/10ths would recommend Taiwanese buildings, but it scarred me for a while. Got shocked the other day. Work in the solar industry. I thought I was having a heart attack and that this was it. Did this happen in Houston by chance? Or did some other dude this week happen to shock himself on the job too? Glad you're okay though. That must have been scary. Not in Houston, but poor dude. As teens, 14 over 15, friends and myself had a random creepy dude walk up on us at my neighbor's house while having a sleepover. Her driveway was super long, and we lived in the middle of nowhere. The day my uncle attacked my mom, and then later that night, came to my parents' house with the intent of killing everyone that left the home. He did succeed in taking my brother from us. Then we all had to be under police protection at my mom's hospital room until they found my uncle. I'm so sorry. I wrote about this in another post, but I lived with my abusive ex for about a year because I ran away from my dad's side of the family, which was also abusive sexually. When I went to live with my mom, she said the apartment was too small for the both of us and that I should stay with my boyfriend in public housing because she wasn't used to dealing with me as an adult. The last time I lived with her I was 7 years old. My ex's anger definitely went up several levels during our relationship. It started by him pushing me when he was upset. Then he would be upset at his mother and throw glass and yell. We had one scary situation where he actually lifted the stove from the hinges because he was so upset at his mother for asking him to clean. One day I came back to his house and I noticed his apartment door was still open. His mother was crying, and as I peeked through the door I saw him standing there with a large knife close to her neck. I immediately pushed him and asked him what his issue was and told him it was nuts to be that upset. He looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Oh, you wanna be involved? I'll make sure you're involved today." He chased me to his bedroom. I locked the doors. He knocked it down and proceeded to punch me like a boxer. At some point I dropped, and thankfully when I woke the phone had dropped close to me and I was able to call 911. He was in the other room slapping his mother apparently. 911 came and took me in an ambulance. I had 2 kidney contusions and 2 broken fingers. That night haunted me for years and still gives me chills. I was rafting. Our supplies and cooler were tied down. The cooler got dislodged on a rock when we capsized, and my left leg got tangled up in the rope. I was being dragged down by the weight of the now water-filled cooler, which was also tangled in a submerged tree. Nobody could swim the current to me. I luckily had a knife on my hip and had to submerge myself under to cut the rope. We were hungry that night, but I was lucky as hell to be alive. Wow, I'm glad you had knife on you. I used to work security at a hospital. About 2 AM. Walking around with my partner trying to stay awake. We see a man in the fairly dark parking lot at the back of the hospital. As we get closer we notice that he is holding a large knife, chef's knife, that is covered with blood. He starts to move towards us, knife in hand. We both start backing up and yell at him to drop the knife. The moments between us noticing the knife and yelling at him was the closest I've come to fearing for my life. Right before we radioed for the police, he stopped moving towards us and slowly put down the knife. As we approached we noticed that the blood was from self-harm. We applied pressure to the wounds and brought him into the emergency department. There were many holy yes moments in that job, but that was the only time I feared for my life, if only for a few seconds. Rocket attack in Iraq. I just remember thinking I don't want to die like this as debris rained down on my room's roof. Utter feeling of impotence. It was easier getting shot at. Glad you are here, man. Hoping your days are peaceful now. My mom was hospitalized with cancer when I was in college. So for a while I had to live with just my stepdad. Over time, I slowly realized that he was watching me, standing outside the bathroom while I showered, looking through the hole in my broken bedroom door, a ladder next to the bathroom window, his shadow in the window at night. I was so stressed from my mom's cancer and his actions I developed a lot of paranoia. I was so scared he was going to rape and kill me. I hid a knife under my pillow and a croquet mallet next to my bed. I eventually told my grandparents and went to live with them, but they decided I couldn't tell my mom or tell anyone. He never touched me. I didn't have any proof that he'd watched me change. It's just something I had to live with. I haven't really had anything to do with him since mom died, but every time I see him in town I hide or leave. I'm still terrified of him. Epidural went up instead of down for my C-section. First I tasted something gross in my mouth. Then I couldn't breathe properly and told the doctor, but he didn't believe me, just told me to breathe deeply. Then I fell asleep. So I obviously coded for a while after that bullshit. I was so scared while everything was going numb. And I mean numb. Mental that they ignored you. Same thing happened to my wife during a natural birth, and as soon as she said she couldn't breathe they hit the alarms and she went straight for an emergency C-section. An anesthetist had put the epidural into her spinal column, a difference of a few millimeters, but because epidurals are more powerful than spinals, it was essentially an overdose. Scariest moment of my life thinking about losing them. Wasn't the only time or most frightening time, but the most memorable was when I was a teenager and got pinned to a wall by an extremely agitated cow. She'd knocked her water bucket apart and I was replacing it and she charged me. I just happened to fit exactly in between the horns. I do mean exactly. I had matching bruises on each side, like I'd been hit twice with a length of pipe. She hit hard enough to drive her points a couple inches into the wall and stick. I've been in car accidents, fallen off things, been in fights and even had a young tree fall on me. None of that compares. Felt like being caught by a huge wave. Anyway, I bonked her as hard as I could on the forehead and bolted out the door. When she pulled her head back, the whole thing took maybe 2 seconds tops. Best part? My parents were right outside. They thought I'd just been killed. The wall was solid for the first 4 feet, then 2 in gaps between 2 X8 boards for the rest. They saw the whole thing, but couldn't see me below my shoulders. Just the charge, the catch, and the wall crack from the impact and the horns pushing through. I deliver sailboats. I've been in several low holy FS moments, but when you're sailing those moments can last hours, if not days. I could imagine. I've watched videos of cruises traveling during S weather and the waves crashing the cabins. I'm like fuck that lol. I went to Florida for my friend's birthday about a month ago, which just so happened to fall on spring break. We witnessed a shooting while at a bar and had to duck and then evacuate. It was my first time ever hearing an actual gunshot. Still remember all the people screaming and running. This is like medical related, not a situation like in most other replies. So basically, one day 2 years ago I started noticing some really odd symptoms I had that resembled a UT, which I had never had before. But I kind of had this gut feeling it was more than that, even though the symptoms were subtle, so I told my parents immediately. I woke up the next morning at 5 AM with this sharp pain in my bottom right side. Oh, Maybe it's a cramp. I use the bathroom and try to get back to sleep, but this pain starts growing. So much it feels like a stabbing pressure. I toss onto my side. The pain is still fully there. I go on my stomach. Still fully there. I sit up, walk around, do any position possible, and the pain is only getting worse, and at this point, like 15 minutes after I woke up, unbearable. I have no idea what's going on, and I'm scared out of my mind. So I tell my parents. Our first guess is appendicitis. So my mom rushes me to the and on the car, right there I'm writhing in pain, crying. No matter how I sit or how I press my side, the pain just continues to escalate. I get to the and they don't take me right away, and in the waiting room I'm throwing up into a bag from the pain and apologizing to a couple next to me in between bouts of dry heaving / vomit. I'm finally taken in, and they take me to get an ultrasound like 10 minutes later, but I can't stay still when the technician is taking it because of the pain. I eventually stop even attempting to cooperate and demand pain medicine, and when it's put into my fourth I took like 10 minutes to lay there and breathe and feel better. It felt so nice to not be in extreme pain. Anyways, I had a kidney stone. A tiny little kidney stone made me think I was dying, and was genuinely the most painful thing I've experienced in my life. I remember asking my mom on the car ride over if I was dying, because we had no idea what it was and why it was only getting worse. It's a genetic thing for me, but if you're reading this, drink water. Got swept out into the Solent on a riptide. In retrospect, riptide and Solent meant I wasn't really gonna go anywhere. But even so, 12-year-old me wasn't thinking like that. 0/10 would not recommend. What's his silent? Me and a group of friends were threatened by a group of lads with knives when we were younger, so that was interesting. Years and years ago went on a 911 call for a overdose. Arrived on scene to an open door. 0 PD response because they had no available units. So we looked and saw a young male not breathing on a couch with his sharp literally on the floor next to him. Takes us seconds to confirm, basically it's a heroin odd. We start to breath for him essentially, and at that time as EMTs we weren't allowed to carry Narcan. So as my partner comes in with gurney to move this guy over, his roommate runs in with a pistol and just is yelling and screaming that they didn't do drugs and that he left class if we say he did or tell anyone that he did. So we are basically shitting ourselves at this point. Thankfully a PD unit had cleared their other call and made their way over just as we were getting on scene, and we just didn't know because they arrived and got this guy's attention and ended up shooting him when he pointed the gun their way. We ended up pronouncing the guy who pulled the gun on scene and the original odd patient we transported, and he ended up being fine. Scary shit. Made me completely rethink how I ran calls from then on out. I have a more light-hearted one. I heard strange noises from my basement, and though someone broke in, my heart was racing and I didn't know what to do. I kept listening down the stairs at the noise and decided it wasn't human. Turns out a woodpecker came down the flue and out the access hatch and was flying around. I managed to shoo him out the door and breathed a sigh of relief. Wrestling with a guy who just shot a clerk with his Tech 9. Hard to say a lot from a single sentence, but it sounds to me like you're a hero. Not many people would do that in such a situation. I hydroplaned when someone brake checked me and ended up in a ditch. I was fine, my car was fine. My heart rate was going insane. I hit black ice on the freeway once and spun off into the berm. Car was 90 degrees on its side. Luckily, there was so much snow it totally cushioned everything, and the car was literally 100% fine. When my lung collapsed the first time, spontaneous pneumothorax, and I staggered over from the pool I just closed down while working as a lifeguard to the manager's office to collapse on his couch and ask him to call 911. I remember my vision going black around the edges as I walked the couple hundred feet or so as the pain stabbed into my chest and neck like a knife. Never felt such pain before or since. Got hauled off in my first and only, so far, ambulance ride. It happened 4 more times after that and hasn't happened for about 12 years now, so I got pretty used to it eventually. to the point where I walked into an urgent care and told them my lung collapsed yesterday and sleeping it off didn't work. The doc didn't believe me and then apologized for not believing me after seeing the x-ray. He said I needed to go to the ER right away. I stopped to get Wendy's on the way and then finally got the chest tube and multi-day inpatient stay I'd been trying to avoid. That was the last and hopefully final time